I never planned to be at the same corner coffee shop every morning at 7:30. It just happened that way. My apartment's heater groaned through the nights, and the place always smelled faintly of dust. Coming here gave me a reason to step outside before work. The barista already knew my order, black coffee, no sugar, but she still asked each time. Routine has a way of pretending to be choice. That's where I first saw her. She came in without looking around, hair still damp from a shower, a thin scarf tucked into a gray coat. Mid-40s, maybe older, the kind of face that doesn't rush to be looked at. She ordered tea, held the paper cup with both hands like she was trying to warm herself from something bigger than the weather. I noticed because she never took a phone out of her bag, never put in earbuds. She just stood, waiting, eyes somewhere on the floor tiles. We didn't speak for weeks. Just a flick of recognition, like being on the same train every morning. I'd glance up from my book, some dog-eared paperback I barely read, and she'd be there at the counter. Once, she caught me looking. Instead of looking away, she gave a small, polite smile. My thumb pressed hard against the page's edge until it left a crease. It was a Tuesday when our lines finally crossed. She reached for a packet of sugar and dropped it. I bent to pick it up at the same time. Our hands almost touched, mine clumsy, hers steady but slow. "Thanks," she said, voice low, like she was used to speaking softly. "No problem," I said, and then added, "You're always early." I wasn't sure why I said it. It felt too personal. Her mouth curved, not quite a smile. Some habits are hard to break. That was all. She stirred her tea once, twice, set the spoon down, and walked to the window seat. I stayed at the counter, pretending to scroll through my phone. I opened a draft message to an old friend and stared at the empty box. My thumb hovered, but I didn't type anything. I've been doing that a lot lately, starting, stopping, not sending. The next morning she was there again. This time she nodded at my cup. "Black coffee." "Yeah. You." "Earl Grey." "Always." A small joke, maybe. She took her seat. I folded my napkin into smaller and smaller squares until it tore. The shop's clock ticked louder than usual. I wondered what her story was, but it felt safer not to ask. By Friday, we had a rhythm. She would comment on the weather or the music playing too loud. I'd answer with something dry. We both laughed once, quiet, at the same moment, when the espresso machine sputtered like it was coughing. Nobody else noticed. It felt like a secret, even though it wasn't. Today was different. She stood closer than usual at the counter, her scarf slipping a little. I caught a faint smell of rain on her coat, though the sky was clear. She looked at me as if about to say something, then checked the time on a small silver watch. Her fingers brushed her cup, but didn't pick it up. "I won't be here tomorrow," she said finally. "Early meeting." "Oh," I said. "Okay." She hesitated. "But maybe another time?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. She gave a small wave and left. The bell over the door jingled once, twice, then stopped. Through the window, I watched her cross the street without looking back. When I sat down, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "There's something you should know about her." I stared at the screen, thumb frozen over the reply box, coffee cooling between my hands. She was back at the coffee shop on Monday, like she'd never said she'd miss a day. Different scarf, same silver watch. I almost wanted to ask about the early meeting, but it felt too much like prying. Instead, I raised my cup in a half wave. She raised hers back. The small act landed heavier than I expected. We ended up walking out together. The air smelled like wet concrete, even though the rain hadn't started yet. She slowed her pace when I did, and for a block we were just two people moving in the same direction. "You always head this way?" she asked. "Yeah. Works down near the river. I'm on Maple Street. Office building with the glass front." She hesitated. "Accounting. Glamorous, right?" I smiled. "Sounds stable. Better than my job." "What's yours?" "IT support at a logistics firm. First real one since college. I mostly tell people to restart their computers." She laughed softly. It sounded like someone exhaling after holding a breath too long. We stopped at the crosswalk. She touched the strap of her bag, thumb rubbing the leather. "I used to do something else. Before the divorce." The word came out neutral, but hung in the space between us. "I taught English at a high school. 20 years. "That's a long time," I said. She nodded. Felt like a lifetime. A bus hissed by. I wanted to ask more, but didn't. We crossed when the light changed, our arms brushing once. She didn't pull away, neither did I. 2 days later, my kitchen sink wouldn't stop dripping. I mentioned it when she handed me my coffee, half joke, half habit. She tilted her head. Upstairs unit's the same layout, she said. Wanting to take a look? I fixed a few before. I blinked. You're serious? Sure. She smiled faintly. Perks of being a landlady. Or ex-teacher. I'm good with stubborn things. 10 minutes later, she was in my apartment, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hair pinned up loosely. She crouched by the cabinet under the sink, twisting the valve with practiced hands. I stood nearby, useless, folding a dish towel into smaller squares. The smell of her soap, citrusy, mixed with damp metal. Not your usual landlord vibe, I said. She glanced up. Not your usual tenant vibe either. Her tone was light, but her eyes stayed on mine a moment longer than needed before returning to the pipes. I tried to focus on the faucet, not the shape of her shoulders under the loose sweater. A voice in my head kept running loops. She's twice your age. She's your landlady. She just fixed your sink. She straightened, wiped her hands on the towel I'd folded. There. Should hold for a while. A loose strand of hair clung to her cheek. Without thinking, I reached to point it out, then stopped short. She tucked it back herself, a quick, efficient gesture. Thanks, I said, voice too low. I owe you. You already paid your rent. She smiled again, but didn't leave right away. Instead, she picked up the mug on my counter. Earl Grey. Yeah, I said. Thought I'd try it. She turned the cup slowly, thumb on the rim. How is it? Different, I said. In a good way. Her gaze flicked to me. Something flickered, surprise, maybe, or recognition. I used to drink it on long grading nights. Reminded me of my grandmother. I pictured her at a desk full of papers, the same mug cooling beside her. She must have been proud, I said. She died before I graduated college. A small shrug. But she liked to see me busy. We sat then, opposite sides of the small table, both holding tea. The apartment was quiet except for the muted tick of the hallway clock. She tapped her nail on the mug once, twice, then stopped. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. I thought later, maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. She broke the silence. You're very young, she said softly, not a question. I know, I said. Her eyes moved to the window, where rain had finally started, streaking the glass. She reached across the table, not far, just enough to straighten the torn edge of the towel near my hand. Her fingers brushed my knuckle, light as a test. Then she drew back, folding the towel neatly, as if nothing had happened. She stood, adjusting her scarf. Faucet should be fine now, she said. I walked her to the door. She gave a small nod, but before leaving she looked back, her expression unreadable, somewhere between a warning and an invitation. The door clicked shut. My kitchen smelled faintly of Earl Grey and wet pavement, and my hand still tingled where her fingers had grazed it. Thursday evening. I wasn't supposed to be home. Overtime had been canceled last minute. The hall smelled like fresh paint. When I came up the stairs, she was kneeling by the mailbox, sorting envelopes with a small frown. A thin sweater, hair loose, glasses this time. She looked like someone off duty. Oh, hi, I said. Too loud in the stairwell. She straightened, pressing the letters to her chest. Didn't expect you back so early. Me neither. We stood there, both blocking the narrow hall. I gestured to the envelopes. Everything okay? Just bills. She smiled, then let it fade. Nothing exciting. A door opened upstairs. Footsteps, a young woman's voice calling my name. My coworker, dropping off something I'd left at the office. She saw us, gave a quick glance between us, then handed me the folder. Here you go. A faint grin like she knew a secret. Then she left. The stairwell felt smaller. She's a friend, I said, unnecessary. I assumed. Her tone was light, but she shifted the mail in her arms, as if to leave. Can I make you tea? I blurted. Earl Grey. She hesitated. All right. Just for a minute. Inside my apartment the lamp was dim, rain tapping against the window. She sat at the table while I filled the kettle. I caught myself smoothing my shirt, moving things that didn't need moving. She watched quietly, fingers tracing the rim of an empty glass. You work long hours, she said. Sometimes. Keeps me out of trouble. I smiled, but it landed flat. She nodded, eyes on the steam rising from the kettle. It's easy to get used to being alone. I wasn't sure if she meant me or herself. I set the mugs down. Our hands almost met on the handle of the sugar jar. We both pulled back at once. She looked at me then, really looked, like she was reading something written behind my face. I should go soon, she murmured. You don't have to, I said quickly, then softer. Unless you want to. Silence. The kettle clicked off. She wrapped both hands around her mug without drinking. I watched the tendons shift in her fingers, the small pulse at her wrist. My heart beat against my ribs like it wanted out. She drew a breath. You're kind. Too kind. I don't. I started, then stopped. Words felt like stepping onto ice. She reached across the table, not to touch, but to move the spoon closer to me. Her sleeve brushed my arm. The contact was nothing, everything. For a second, neither of us moved. Her eyes flicked to my mouth, then away. I leaned forward an inch before I caught myself. She did the same, then straightened, pushing the mug back slightly. A quiet barrier. I really should go, she said again, standing. I nodded, staring at the steam twisting up from her untouched tea. My lips parted with something half-formed, but no sound came. At the door she paused. Good night, she said softly, without looking back. The latch clicked. The smell of her perfume lingered, a thin line between what almost happened and what didn't. We walked without planning to. It had rained in the morning, leaving the sidewalks damp and smelling of leaves. She'd texted, are you around? And I'd said yes before thinking. Now we were moving side by side down Maple Street. Her umbrella folded under her arm, though the sky was still heavy. You always walk fast, she said after a block. Sorry. I slowed. Old habit from commuting. She gave a small nod. I used to rush everywhere. Students, deadlines. Now I have all this time, and I don't know what to do with it. We passed a playground. Empty swings creaked in the breeze. She watched them for a second, then looked away. Her hand brushed the railing, fingertips trailing the chipped paint. You okay? I asked. She shrugged. Just tired. We stopped at a low park bench under a tree. The wood was damp, but she sat anyway, smoothing her skirt. I sat too, keeping a polite distance. Her scarf had slipped a little. I could see the hollow at her throat. I saw you with that coworker, she said suddenly. The one who came by the other day. I blinked. Emma. She just dropped off a file. I know. She twisted her fingers together. It's not my business. But she stopped. Never mind. I watched her knuckles whiten. You can ask, I said quietly. Her laugh was soft, bitter. What would I even ask? Why a woman my age is sitting on a bench with someone who could be her former student? She looked at me then, eyes sharp but shining. I was a teacher for 20 years. You know how many times I told kids to think twice before they crossed a line? My throat tightened. We're not. I started, but the words fell apart. We're not anything, she said for me. I keep telling myself that. Silence spread out. A car hissed past on wet asphalt. She lifted her hands, then let them drop into her lap. After the divorce, I told myself I'd be invisible. Safer that way. Her voice went thinner. And then you showed up with your coffee and your polite smile, and I started remembering what it's like to be noticed. I stared at the ground. I notice you, I said, almost under my breath. She turned toward me fully. Don't, she said, but it sounded like a plea more than a warning. I swallowed hard. I don't know what you want from me. I don't either, she whispered. Wind stirred the branches above us. A single drop of water fell onto the back of her hand. She didn't brush it away. Instead, she looked past me, out toward nothing, like she was trying to see a road she'd left long ago. I shouldn't be here, she said after a while. Not like this. I wanted to tell her it wasn't wrong, that we were just sitting on a bench. But my mind kept flashing with small images, her fixing my sink, her fingers grazing mine, the smell of her perfume in my apartment. The line between ordinary and something else had already blurred. I think about you, I said finally. More than I should. Her breath caught. Don't say that, she murmured. It's true. She closed her eyes. You're kind. You're young. You still believe things can start fresh. And you don't. She opened her eyes again. I've seen how starts end. Her fingers dug into the fabric of her scarf. I don't want to ruin you. You wouldn't, I said. You couldn't. A long pause. She reached out, almost reflex, and touched the back of my hand. Not a brush this time. Just rested her fingers there, warm against my damp skin. My heart pounded so loud I thought she could hear it. We sat like that, no one speaking, her hand on mine. The swings creaked again behind us. A dog barked somewhere far off. She withdrew her hand slowly, like pulling back from heat. I should go, she said, but she didn't stand. Her eyes stayed on me, searching. I leaned forward an inch, then another. She mirrored the movement, then stopped. Our faces were close enough for me to see the flecks of green in her irises. Neither of us breathed. What are we doing? She whispered. I didn't answer. The question hung there, heavier than anything we'd said. Waiting. She didn't come to the coffee shop on Monday. Or Tuesday. By Wednesday, the barista had stopped glancing at the door when the bell rang. I kept ordering the same thing anyway, sitting at the same window seat, thumb hovering over my phone like a nervous tick. No message came. By Thursday, I gave up and walked home by the long route, past the park where we'd sat. The bench was wet from drizzle. I thought about sitting anyway, but kept going. The city felt louder than usual, buses and horns smearing together. I realized how much space she'd been taking up in my quiet. That night my phone buzzed, an unknown number again. Just a line, busy week. Don't wait. No name, but I knew. My chest tightened and then loosened, like an inhale that couldn't find an exhale. I typed, okay, hope you're all right. Then deleted it. Typed again, need anything? Deleted. Locked the screen. Friday evening she finally appeared. Not at the coffee shop, but in the hallway outside my apartment, checking her mailbox. Her hair was pulled back neatly, makeup on, a different scarf, bright red instead of gray. She looked like she'd stepped back into an old life. You've been gone, I said before I could stop myself. Just busy, she said. Voice careful, like every word had been measured. She held an envelope a little too tightly. Everything okay? She hesitated. My son's back from college. He's staying with me for a while. A small shrug. He doesn't know about anything. Not that there's anything to know. I blinked. You have a son? Two, she said quietly. But only one still comes home. Her eyes flicked to mine. I should have said. I don't usually talk about them. Oh, I said. Right. Silence settled like dust. She adjusted the envelope, knuckles pale. Anyway, that's why I've been elsewhere. I nodded. Makes sense. We both stood there, trying not to look like we were standing there. Finally, she said, I should go. He's waiting. Sure, I said. Of course. She started to turn, then stopped. I didn't mean to disappear, she said softly. Just needed to think. I wanted to ask what she'd decided. Instead, I said, okay. She gave a small, apologetic smile and walked off down the hall. The echo of her steps felt longer than the hall itself. That weekend, I skipped the coffee shop. Tried a diner across town. Ordered tea instead of coffee, but it tasted wrong. I kept glancing at the door anyway. On Sunday night, I drafted a message. I miss our mornings. Stared at it. Deleted. I opened a new one. If you ever want to walk again, deleted. The phone screen dimmed, my reflection looking back at me like someone else entirely. I went to the window. Across the street, her apartment light was on. A shadow moved past the curtain, someone taller than her, probably her son. For a moment, I imagined her laughing at some story, pouring tea, her hand brushing his shoulder the way it had brushed mine. A perfectly normal scene. A life I had no claim to. I didn't feel heartbroken, I thought. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. I grabbed my jacket, walked down the stairs, and out into the night. Past her building. Stopped at the door. My hand hovered near the buzzer, fingers just shy of pressing. 1 second. 2. Then I pulled my hand back, shoved it in my pocket, and kept walking. It was raining again. A thin, steady drizzle that blurred the streetlights into halos. I stood outside the coffee shop, hands shoved into my jacket, watching the door stay shut. She hadn't come all week. I told myself I'd stop waiting, but my feet still carried me there every morning. Tonight, I walked to her building instead. Not sure why. Just walked. The sidewalk shone slick and empty. Her window was lit, curtain half drawn. I could see her moving inside, a shape more than a person, pacing maybe. I stood on the stoop, rain dripping from my hood. My thumb hovered over the buzzer. All week I'd hovered. This time I pressed. A pause. Then her voice over the intercom, small and tinny. "Hello. It's me," I said. "I'm downstairs." Silence. Then the lock clicked. I climbed the stairs, heart too loud. She opened her door before I reached it. No scarf, no makeup, just a sweatshirt, hair pulled back loosely. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "You're wet," she said, stepping aside. "Come in." I wiped my shoes, feeling like a kid. Her apartment smelled of tea and damp wood. A mug sat half empty on the counter. The TV was on low, muted. Somewhere deeper in the apartment, a door was closed. Her son's room, maybe. We stayed in the kitchen. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "I know," I said, "but I wanted to talk." She folded her arms, not defensive, more like holding herself in. "About what?" "About us," I said, then shook my head. "About whatever this is." She let out a small breath. "There isn't an US. You know that." "I know what you've been to me," I said. "Even if it's just mornings and tea and fixing a sink. It's the first thing that's felt real in a long time." She stared at the countertop. "My son's asleep. He thinks I'm getting my life back together." Her fingers toyed with the edge of the mug. "I can't explain you to him. I can barely explain you to myself." "I'm not asking for anything," I said. "I just didn't want it to end like it never happened." Her shoulders dropped a little. "You're young. You still have time to make things happen." I took a step closer. "I'm not here because of time. I'm here because of you." She looked up finally. Her eyes were glassy, but she didn't look away. "If I let this happen," she whispered, "I don't know who I'll be to myself after." "And if you don't?" I asked. She gave a small, sad laugh. "Then I go back to being someone invisible. Maybe that's safer." The fridge hummed. Rain tapped against the window. I could feel the choice sitting between us like a third person. Say it and risk it. Stay silent and lose it. "I think about you," I said again, steady this time. "Not just the coffee. You." She closed her eyes. "Don't make me want something I can't keep." "I'm not trying to make you want anything," I said. "I just needed you to know." Her hands trembled slightly as she set down the mug. Then she reached out, not far, and touched the back of my wrist. A quiet, deliberate touch. Her thumb made a small circle there. "I wish I'd met you when I was 24, she murmured. "I wish I'd met you anyway," I said. We both almost smiled. Not quite. She withdrew her hand, but didn't step back. "We can't," she started, then stopped. "But thank you for telling me." I nodded. My chest felt both lighter and heavier. "Okay," I said softly. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she gave the smallest smile, tired but real. She reached up and smoothed a damp strand of hair off my forehead. A simple, human gesture, nothing more. "You're soaked," she said. I let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. "Yeah." We stood there in her kitchen, the hum of the fridge and the rain on the window, not saying goodbye, but not saying anything else either. Just a small touch, a small smile, a quiet okay between us, a pause that, for once, felt like an ending we'd chosen. Spring came without us noticing. The rain stopped being an event, it became background. By then I'd stopped waiting at the coffee shop every morning. I still went, but at different times, trying to teach myself a new routine. 8:47 instead of 7:30. Black coffee instead of tea. Small changes, like moving furniture around a room to see it differently. Sometimes she was there. Sometimes she wasn't. When she was, we'd nod, exchange a few words about the weather, the headlines, nothing else. It felt like a truce we hadn't negotiated but both understood. Weeks passed. Her son left for a summer internship in another city. She mentioned it one morning, almost casually, as she stirred sugar into her tea. "Feels like the apartment is echoing again," she said. I smiled, not sure what answer she wanted. She smiled back, the same small, tired curve I'd first noticed months ago. One Saturday she texted, "Walk?" No explanation. I said yes. We met at the park bench. The same one, would now dry and warm under the sun. She'd brought 2 cups, Earl Grey for herself, black coffee for me. I didn't ask how she remembered. We sat without speaking for a while, watching kids play on the swings we'd once seen empty. I'm not invisible anymore, she said finally. I didn't realize how much of my life was just waiting. I looked at her profile in the light. She had new lines around her eyes, but she looked steadier, less braced for impact. Me too, I said. I'm not waiting either. She gave a small nod. You're still young, she said, but it sounded less like a warning and more like a fact. Then she added, but you're not a kid. I know, I said. We stayed on the bench until the shadows lengthened. She told me about a course she'd started taking at the community college, just for herself. I told her about a project at work I actually liked. Ordinary things, but spoken like we were handing each other pieces of proof. Life goes on, and it can hold more than one thing at a time. When we stood to leave, she slipped her hand through the crook of my arm. Not a claim, not a secret. Just an easy, public gesture, like a test she no longer feared failing. We walked out of the park slowly. Nobody stared. Nothing dramatic happened. By early summer we had a new pattern. Not every day, not even every week, but often enough. Sometimes she'd come to my apartment after work, bringing leftover soup. Sometimes I'd help her carry groceries upstairs. Sometimes we just sat on the bench at 8:47 a.m., each with our own cup, letting the morning happen around us. We never made speeches about it. We never called it anything. But the air between us stopped feeling like a pause and started feeling like space we both wanted to fill. She laughed more. I found myself reaching for her hand without thinking. No one had to hide. It wasn't perfect. It was lived in. One evening in her kitchen, the rain back on the window, she handed me a mug of Earl Grey. I took it without comment, even though it wasn't my usual. She raised an eyebrow. You're drinking tea now? Sometimes, I said. Old habits are hard to break. Her smile widened just enough to show she got the call back. She reached out and brushed a crumb from my sleeve, the way she'd once brushed water from my hand on the bench. Small gestures, but they'd stopped being almost touches. They were just touches now. I used to think I was waiting for life to start, she said softly. I squeezed her hand. Maybe it already did. She looked at me then, eyes steady, and for the first time there was no question hiding behind them. Just a quiet recognition of where we'd arrived. Later, as we walked back to the park for no reason, she said, "This is the bench," and laughed under her breath. I know, I said. I remember everything. We sat down, sipping from mismatched cups. Around us, the world moved. Cars, kids, dogs, but the space between us felt settled. Not a pause. A sentence finally finished.